Another day, another drone from DJI. Yeah. Stewart here from Drone Film Guide, the channel where we learn to fly like filmmakers. Today we're talking about the Mavic Air 2S. Now we're so far down the line with DJI, of course it's a good product. Yes, we're sponsored, but come on, we know that now. The question is it a good drone for you? Let's answer that now. I like to start review videos by talking about your needs, your wants, and your budget. And given I don't know what those are for you, all I can do is give you some facts, a little bit of opinion, and hopefully that will help you on your way. So speaking of budget, if you have $999 burning a hole in your pocket, the Air 2S might well be a good drone for you. However, in today's discussion, there is a fourth variable, and that is your level of experience. You see, the headline feature on this drone is the 1-inch sensor camera capable of shooting 10-bit video up to 5.4K resolution. On paper at least, this is the best camera that DJI has given us on a consumer or prosumer level drone, and that for me is very exciting. I love playing around with the image in post. I like stretching out the colors, adding gradient masks, spot corrections, things that would typically destroy a lower quality 8-bit image, but you have the flexibility in your 10-bit picture to really play around with those colors. And from an aerial filmmaking perspective, it's really useful because we deal with high contrast scenes a lot. Sun in the sky, silhouetted landscape, we need some post-production modifications. So if you're able to shoot with the editing in mind, you can really take advantage of a 10-bit picture profile similar to the one that you get on a Mavic 2 Pro. However, if you're new to this and you're not going to be able to take advantage of that capability, or you just have no interest, then you could be paying a lot of money for functionality that isn't of any use to you. So we have different tools for different jobs at different levels of experience through the chain. We'll talk about that in a bit more detail in a second. There are some other things to talk about in terms of the upwards facing obstacle avoidance sensors, which are a great addition, especially if you combine it with the likes of Active Track 4.0 as it is now, so we have confidence the drone's not going to slide into any tree branches. We have OcuSync 3.0 for an even greater transmission range. We have an improved FPV gimbal mode, which you may have not realized was present on previous drones, but it just really wasn't usable. Whereas now we can get that rocking and rolling FPV effect. And we have another video on that coming out, but it really is very, very good and I enjoy it very much. And we have some master shots, which are like automated modes for beginners, which are interesting. So there's a few more things to talk about, but at the end of the day, the main point of focus here is this camera. So let's explore that in a little bit more detail now. Let's throw the camera specs up on the wall. We have a 1-inch sensor, as you know, with a 22mm field of view, fixed aperture f2.8 and a variable focusing system. In video mode, we can shoot 10-bit video with the D-Log picture profile, up to 5.4K resolution in the real-time frame rates of 24, 25 and 30 frames per second. At 4K, we can get all the way up to 68 frames per second, and in photo mode, we have 20 megapixel raw photographs. So at face value, we have the Mavic 2 Pro camera on a cheaper, smaller drone. This is excellent. And actually, in a few ways, this camera is better than the Mavic 2 Pro. Subjectively speaking, I enjoy the wider field of view. Mavic Air 2S, 22mm, Mavic 2 Pro, 28mm. If I'm doing landscapes, I want the shots to be as immersive as possible. 22mm is wider. This is better, and especially with all that resolution at 5.4K, we can punch in a little bit if we needed to. The Mavic 2 Pro also had barrel distortion. In the interest of having a nice clean read off the sensor, we could see some of the optical distortion from the lens. Now, that really wasn't a bonus, I have to say. It wasn't a benefit, so it's nice to not have to deal with that on the Mavic Air 2S. So the Mavic Air 2S is probably now the best consumer or prosumer drone from DJI on the market. Mavic 2 Pro still excellent. The variable aperture is nice on the Mavic 2 Pro, I have to say, because if you have an ND filter on there, you can tweak your exposure in the sky by adjusting your aperture, blah, 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 blah. We'll get into that at some other point. But this is a seriously impressive drone, the Air 2S, especially when you consider its size and its price. However, there is one little kind of beef that I want to bring your attention to, and it might influence your purchasing decision. Just like the Mavic 2 Pro, we do not get the high quality D-Cine-like 8-bit picture profile on the Mavic Air 2S. Instead, we get the normal picture profile, or we get 10-bit D-Log-M. Now, I've never recommended shooting in the normal picture profile. I find the midtones and the shadows too crushed, the image is too stretched in terms of its contrast, and it doesn't really give you much flexibility in post for editing. I've always recommended you go straight to the best picture profile, which is normally D-Cine-like, or in the case of the Mavic 2 Pro, D-Log-M. Now, obviously with the Mavic Air 2S, I would recommend you go straight to the 10-bit D-Log-M, but if you're not at that stage, you're going to have to shoot normal, in which case you've just spent an awful lot of money for a drone that shoots a normal, contrasty picture profile. So you need to ask yourself, are you interested in color grading and color correction? Do you really want to get into it? Do you have a computer fast enough to process 10-bit H.265 footage? If the answer to that question is no, then this isn't the drone for you. Look elsewhere. I would get the original Mavic Air 2 if I'm honest, and just take advantage of the really nice picture quality that you get. It's 8-bit, but it's still great, D-Cine-like, fantastic images off the original Air. This is really for the more discerning filmmaker who probably already has a bit of experience color grading and color correcting, maybe with traditional ground cameras in addition to drones. And it is a nicer experience if you're at that stage, but it does take a bit of work. We'll get into this in another video, but you need to set your white point and your black point. You then need to add some contrast within those predefined ranges, probably by way of a curves adjustment. That's certainly the way that we've been doing it. You'll need to add back some saturation, then you might want to modify the colors for the grade, for the look. Maybe you add a LUT to do that. So there is a bit of work getting from A to B if you are shooting 10-bit on this camera, but the rewards are there, and I certainly would recommend it if you're interested in that. If you want to get the best possible results from your Mavic Air 2S or any other drone for that matter, do grab yourselves a copy of our free ebook From Drone Zero to Drone Hero, 37 tips to get you flying like a filmmaker. While you're at it, do check out our premium content. Our 100-minute drone cinematography crash course is a very enjoyable and great way to get started. And alternatively, if you really want to be the best aerial filmmaker you can possibly be, our 8-hour drone cinematography masterclass version 2.0 will get you from drone owner to drone pilot to drone cinematographer in the most informative and enjoyable way possible. Now, much as DJI sends us our drones these days, and this is a sponsored video, it is a review, not an advert. So I have a few more things to say about this drone. If we talk about the 5.4K resolution, yes, it gives us nice crispy images, but for me the real advantage is being able to crop either in camera in a digital zoom kind of way or in post-production. Now, it's a little bit odd at the moment. If you shoot in the D-Log picture profile, which as I've explained at length, you should be if you're buying this drone, then you don't get access to the digital zoom within the app and within the camera itself. That for me is a bit strange. So if you want to punch in at the time of capture, you need to do it with the normal picture profile, which you shouldn't be using if you're buying this drone. So I'm hoping at some point we'll get the digital zoom lenses with the D-Log picture profile. The original Mavic Air 2 gives us this zoom option. It's a crop essentially, a lossless crop depending on how far in you go. And with the Mavic 2 Pro we also get the so-called high quality field of view, which is where we get a sensor crop from the middle of the sensor, and we get approximately a 40% zoom if you like, or it comes in at about a 40mm field of view equivalent. So we have some digital zoom options on these other drones at the best, highest quality picture profile. I'd like to see that on the Mavic Air 2S. In terms of slow motion frame rates, DJI have done away with the 240 frames per second that is available on the original Mavic Air 2, which is fine by me because I never used it. But the 120 frames per second is cool. It's a shame that there's no 100 frames per second, because if you're dropping your footage into a 25 frames per second timeline like I do, then 120 frames per second does not divide evenly by 25, so you're going to get some stuttering. I'd like to see some 100 frames per second for the European crowd out there. And since we're on that kind of topic, quick shots. I love quick shots. One of the most successful recent videos we had was how to use quick shots cinematically. They're amazing, especially for solo drone pilots. However, they're only available at 30 frames per second, which again, if you drop a 30 frames per second piece of footage into a 25 frames per second timeline, then you're going to have some drop frames and it's not going to look good. If I was in America, I would want them in 24 frames per second, not 30 frames per second, but at least you can slow your 30 frames per second down because you have an even division, mathematically speaking, if you're going to 24 frames per second. So anyway, I don't know why they're doing that. There must be a reason, but it'd be really great to see frame rate options within the quick shots also. Sticking with the camera, since we're really getting into the details here, if you buy the Fly More combo, you're going to get a set of ND filters with it. Now, assuming it's the same set that I got, the maximum strength ND will be ND32. Now, I know from experience that that is not strong enough to get your shutter speed down to 1/50th of a second with a real-time frame rate like 25 frames per second on a bright sunny day, so you can get the motion blur the eye is accustomed to seeing in cinematic footage. So every piece of footage you see in our videos at the moment is shot with a 100th of a second shutter, so it has a slightly more jaggy look to it than is preferred. If that kind of stuff matters to you, you might need to fork out for a few extra ND filters. As promised, there are a few other things to talk about with this drone, and top of the list for me is the FPV gimbal mode. Now this is really cool for me because I've tried over the years to use the FPV gimbal mode on the other Mavics and it just doesn't work. It locks the roll axis of the gimbal, but it's just too jerky. There's no smooth kind of roll in and out of those roll motions, and that's where the optimization has really taken effect here because we get that smooth rocking motion. We still need to fly smoothly. I'd recommend you put the controller into cine mode at the start to help you with that, but you can get some nice rocking motions. It's unlikely to be as exciting as the DJI FPV, which can go at 80 million miles per hour and all that kind of stuff, but it's a really nice addition, and as you can see, we got some really nice dynamic shots with it. Next up, we have the upwards facing obstacle avoidance sensors, which is of course a nice addition. The more obstacle avoidance, the better, especially when you combine it with intelligent flight modes like active track, spotlight, point of interest. Historically, upwards motion and sideways motion hasn't been particularly well protected by obstacle avoidance on the DJI drones, and we're making another step forwards in that respect, which gives us confidence that when we lock onto our subject and then just set it off on active track, it's not going to crash into anything, so that is good. As indicated, some of the intelligent flight modes have had an upgrade to 4.0 in the case of active track. We have 3.0 for point of interest and 2.0 for spotlight. I love them all for different reasons. Very, very useful cinematic tools. Definitely get into your intelligent flight modes if you haven't done so already. My favorite, spotlight. We have a video on that, so do check that out. The quick shots are there as we would expect, and as I've said already, you really need to try and take advantage of those quick shots, especially if you are a solo drone operator. We also have some new functionality in the form of master shots. Here the drone flies up to 10 predefined flight paths, edits it all together, puts it together with some music, and you're good to go on your social media. Because I was running a beta version of the app at the time of doing the Mavic Air 2S drone shoots, I wasn't able to fully test this, but stay tuned for more information on that one. As for the other specifications, do grab yourself a copy of our DJI comparison chart so you can quickly look across the range of drones and see how the Mavic Air 2S compares with some of the other drones. It's a few grams heavier than the original Mavic Air 2 and the battery life is a few minutes shorter. Neither of those things matter to me, I have to say. Otherwise, the form factor is basically exactly the same with the exception of the two sensors on the top and the bigger camera. The controller is exactly the same and the batteries are backwards compatible, so you can interchange them between the two Mavic Air 2s. That's good news. I wonder, I don't know the answer to this, will it be possible just to buy the drone on its own without the controller and without batteries? I wouldn't have thought so, but I think it would be nice since DJI have clearly committed to this new controller design. Speaking of which, I mean, what would you rather have? The Mavic 2 Pro controller, which is this size, even has a screen on it, or the new controller? And this one here is the Mavic Mini controller, the original Mavic Mini controller. I don't find it overly practical having a controller that size. That's the honest truth on that one. When I was doing my shoots, I was doing active track, for example, you have to find somewhere to put this. You know, the smaller the better. Anything you can put in your pocket is good, and that's tricky to put in a pocket. But in terms of using it, it is a joy to use it at the end of the day. It feels good in the hands. It's solid. The phone goes up here. Cables integrated. It's a very nice design. I don't know. There's a reason why they've gone down that route. Can't really criticize it too much. Also, in terms of flight characteristics, something we don't really talk about much these days and we probably take for granted, but the drone is a joy to fly. If you go back far enough to when we started out, what a battle it would be trying to get a Phantom 2 with a GoPro to fly a nice, smooth, arcing motion, a rotation around a subject. A job and a half. Now we have Cine mode, which is perfect for that. It's not too slow, it's not too fast. You can fly nice manual maneuvers around things. Normal mode, I still fly almost everything in normal mode and I can get nice smooth maneuvers in normal mode. And the sports mode, yes, it's fast, but it's also stable, so it can still be used for cinematic footage. So yet again, DJI have hit the ball out the park, this time with the Mavic Air 2S. It really is a great option for the more discerning or experienced drone operator and filmmaker. But don't be disheartened if you already just bought a Mavic Air 2, or you have a Mini 2, or the original Mini, or a Phantom 3. It's what you do with the drone that counts. I really can't emphasize that enough on the channel. So do grab yourself a copy of our free ebook From Drone Zero to Drone Hero, 37 tips to get you flying like a filmmaker. And if you really want to be the best aerial filmmaker that you can be, we have an 8-hour drone cinematography masterclass that you will definitely love. Anyway, there'll be lots more Mavic Air 2S content coming soon, so do stay tuned for that, and we will see you next time.